What if I told you there's an ancient book banned for centuries that reveals truths so deep, not even the pulpits dare to speak of them? Would you believe that a mere man saw God's throne, spoke with angels, and was taken into heaven without ever dying? This isn't fiction. And in 2025, the story is exploding with a force that's shaking what people thought they knew about the end times. This isn't just a symbolic tale, it's a warning, a calling, an awakening that's stirring scholars, theologians, leaders, and ordinary people who sense that something big is about to happen. The Book of Enoch was silenced for centuries, but now its words are echoing again, and the whole world is listening. And you're about to discover why this revelation is leaving even the skeptics stunned. Get ready. What you're about to hear could change everything. Before we continue, if you like our videos and feel that they have blessed your life, like and comment, even if it's just an amen. This makes a huge difference in getting this content to more people and impacting lives. If you are not yet subscribed, take the opportunity to subscribe, turn on notifications, and share with your loved ones. This way, YouTube will get to know you better and suggest even more videos like this to help you on your faith journey. Help to disseminate this message of faith and hope. Each like, comment, and share strengthens this work, which we do with great care to edify your life. Together we can reach even more hearts. Continuing. Some people are called to things the world wouldn't understand, even if it tried. That was Enoch's case. A simple man in the eyes of earth, yet chosen by God to pierce through the veil of the visible and enter where few have dared, the secrets of the heavens. He wasn't looking for greatness. He simply walked with God, day after day, in quietness and integrity. And that says a lot. Sometimes the greatest revolutions come from those who don't shout, but obey. Who would have guessed that an ordinary man would be led to witness the inner workings of the heavens? Uriel, one of the most majestic angels in the celestial hierarchy, was appointed to guide Enoch on this journey. And this wasn't a sightseeing trip, it was a divine summons to see, hear, and record truths that would shape generations. Enoch was given access to realms no earthly sage had ever imagined, but with every revelation came a burden. The weight of responsibility. Have you ever thought that when you ask God for deep insights, you might not be ready to carry what He shows you? The most remarkable thing is that Enoch wasn't chosen because he was eloquent or popular. He was chosen because he was righteous. That alone teaches us something powerful. God doesn't choose the most impressive. He chooses the most available. Like that one person who chooses to pray behind a closed door when no one's watching, or the one who remains honest even when no one's keeping score. Heaven notices, and often it's in that kind of posture that a calling is born that changes everything. When Enoch began writing, he had no idea he was creating something that would transcend millennia. But every word he recorded had a destination. You, yes, you, reading this now, because the mysteries he witnessed weren't meant to be buried in his chest. They were destined to help generations understand the weight of judgment and the mercy of the Creator. What he saw was so extraordinary, writing became the only way to transmit it, as if every line was a ray of light coming down from heaven. And here's something few mention. Enoch's calling didn't disconnect him from the earth, it tied him even closer to it. He became a bridge between heaven and man, a messenger of weighty, sobering truths. That's why when someone receives something from God, it's not to hide in a spiritual bubble. It's to share, to teach, to warn. So if you feel God's been showing you something, don't keep it to yourself. That calling might not be just for you, but for those connected to you. Now think with me. Enoch had visions not only about the present, but of the entire future of humanity. And this journey didn't begin with thunder, it began with a sensitive heart. So if you're waiting for a massive sign before you start obeying, maybe you're missing the real call. Simple obedience is the fertile soil for the greatest purposes. Are you willing to walk with God even when you don't understand everything? Because it's on the path of intimacy that secrets begin to unfold. But what Enoch would witness next was far from peaceful. Fallen angels, forbidden pacts, and a corruption so deep it would shake even the most righteous. Enoch's once serene journey was about to collide with the Watchers and their offspring, who would plunge the earth into chaos. What happens when celestial beings cross the line between the sacred and the profane? The story of the Watchers is one of the most intriguing and disturbing chapters in the book of Enoch. These angels, originally sent to observe the earth, ended up falling in love with the daughters of men. And that love, which should have been restrained, became a pact of rebellion. They descended, took human wives, and began a lineage of chaos, the Nephilim. This wasn't just disobedience, it was a cosmic transgression. And the world would never be the same again. These angels didn't just take human women, they brought humanity knowledge that had previously been reserved for heaven. They taught incantations, astrology, metallurgy, and even sorcery. At first glance, it seems like progress, but in reality it was corruption, like putting dynamite in a child's hands. Humanity, still crawling in understanding, was handed tools of destruction. What began as curiosity quickly became domination, war, and bloodshed. What was meant to help became the seed of destruction. You might be wondering, why was this knowledge so dangerous? Because it was handed over without spiritual maturity. Imagine someone teaching emotional manipulation to a wounded teenager, or giving powerful strategies to someone hungry for control. That's what the Watchers did. They gave access to things humanity wasn't ready to handle. The line between revelation and destruction was crossed. And when man stops seeking God and starts worshipping secret knowledge, he begins digging a hole he may never climb out of. The offspring of these angels, the Nephilim, were not just giants in stature, but in violence. Hybrid creatures that inherited their father's aggression and their mother's frailty. They destroyed crops, cities, entire kingdoms. The Bible references them in mysterious ways, but Enoch describes them as dominating beasts, ravenous and uncontrollable. The earth became a war zone, among men, among angels, and between heaven and earth. It was as if the very fabric of creation had been ripped apart. This part of the story teaches us something profound about boundaries. Not every access is a blessing. Sometimes what looks like knowledge is actually a shortcut to ruin. The same sword that protects can also kill. So ask yourself, what are you receiving? Is it something that builds or something that breaks? Are you seeking divine wisdom or feeding on dangerous curiosities? Because what corrupts the world doesn't always show up with horns. Sometimes it wears the mask of enlightenment. Here comes a warning that still echoes today. There is knowledge that, when given out of season and outside God's will, becomes a trap. That's why the Bible insists so much on obedience before revelation. If the Watchers had remained in their purpose, they wouldn't have triggered the spiritual collapse that dragged the world into darkness. This shows us that even celestial beings can fall when they abandon obedience. And if it happened to them, what makes us think it couldn't happen to us? The chaos these fallen angels caused didn't go unnoticed in heaven. God's patience was running out. It was time for intervention. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel would be sent on a mission both powerful and terrifying, to punish the fallen angels, restore order, and warn Noah of the coming flood. And in the midst of it all, a man named Enoch would continue recording what no one else could see. Heaven does not ignore the pain of earth. When the corruption caused by the Watchers and their offspring, the Nephilim, reached its peak, something shifted in the celestial realms. This wasn't just punishment. It was a deliberate, weighty judgment. The Creator summoned the archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, to intervene. and not gently. Each received a specific assignment to confront evil. Michael would lead the heavenly army against the giants. Raphael would heal the earth. Gabriel would deal justice to the wicked, and Uriel would warn Noah of what was coming. Water on a scale the world had never seen. Corruption had become a living plague. Wickedness was now taught like a craft. Sin had become culture. The violence of the Nephilim caused Earth's cries to rise like smoke. And the saddest part, many people no longer knew the difference between good and evil, and when that happens, judgment becomes inevitable. The Earth was no longer recognizable. It felt like a different world, ruled by hybrid creatures and humans, who no longer feared God. What started as advanced knowledge turned into accelerated destruction. And heaven finally declared, "Enough." Azazel, one of the leaders of the fallen angels, became the symbol of this downfall. According to Enoch, he was the one who taught men how to forge weapons, manipulate metals, and use cosmetics for seductive purposes. He twisted divine knowledge to corrupt the human heart. That's why his sentence was severe, chained in darkness, sealed away until the day of final judgment. It's a powerful image, a reminder that it's not how much you know that defines you, but how you use what you know. Knowledge can be an altar or a prison. God's decision wasn't fueled by blind rage, but by overdue justice. The world had reached its limit, and here lies a hard truth. Sometimes God's love shows up as discipline, like a father stepping in before his child self-destructs. The flood wasn't just destruction, it was a reset. And the fact that God sent messengers before executing judgment proves how just He is. There's always a warning, always a chance. But mercy doesn't last forever. This is where Noah enters the story with incredible strength. While everyone else mocked and ignored the signs, Noah listened and obeyed. Have you ever considered that some of the most powerful acts of obedience happen in silence? Building a massive ark in the middle of a desert, under the scorn of neighbors, was an act of unshakable faith. And this challenges us today. Would we have that kind of courage? To obey even when it seems insane? To follow God's voice even when the world calls it nonsense? The angels carried out their roles precisely. The giants were destroyed. The earth began to be purified. But the judgment of the fallen angels revealed something deeper. Spiritual consequences don't disappear just because the act is over. The evil they planted continued to spread across generations. Enoch saw this. He recorded this because what was at stake wasn't just the present, it was the destiny of all creation. The seeds of sin would keep growing. But now, the warning was written down in heavenly detail, and though it seemed like everything had ended, the truth is that the judgment of the wicked and the reward of the righteous was only beginning. What Enoch would witness next was a glimpse into the eternal fate of every soul, a revelation so intense and spiritual that even today it stirs something deep within anyone who dares to face it. Imagine seeing with your own eyes where the righteous and the wicked go after death. Enoch did, not as a metaphor, but as a concrete, organized, and undeniable reality. He witnessed the final destinations of human souls, and the contrast was so shocking that even creation itself seemed to react. While the righteous entered places of light, peace, and eternal wholeness, the wicked were dragged into realms of shadow, agony, and silence. The universe, which seems so indifferent to our earthly eyes, actually follows the strict order of God, and it rewards or condemns according to that divine law. Why were the wicked condemned so harshly? Because they corrupted something priceless, the free will God had given them. They used their days to walk away from the Creator, choosing crooked paths even after being warned. The sin of the watchers was unforgivable, not out of ignorance, but because of deliberate rebellion. Likewise, many humans continue repeating this pattern. They ignore truth, mock righteousness, and live as if there were no tomorrow. But Enoch reminds us there is a tomorrow, and it is eternal. On the other hand, the fate of the righteous is described with such beauty that human language barely contains. It a place where light doesn't burn, but heals, where justice doesn't crush, but restores, where God himself dwells and all creation vibrates in perfect harmony. It's not just a reward, it's a return to the original plan, where humanity and the Creator walk side by side. And what leads us there? Faith, integrity, obedience that comes from love, not fear. And yes, the courage to go against the flow. Enoch shows us that even the stars follow laws, cycles and rhythms ordained by God. The sun never delays, the moon doesn't wander, the sea doesn't cross its boundaries. Everything obeys, except those who were given free will. That's a profound truth. The problem of humanity has never been ignorance, it's been pride. We want to be the masters of truth, the authors of our destiny. But when we forget we were created to reflect divine glory, we start building a personal hell on earth, and eventually we reap what we sow. At this point, it's impossible not to self-reflect. Where am I heading? Are my choices drawing me closer to God or just feeding my ego? Enoch doesn't give us hollow religious speeches. He holds up a mirror, one we often avoid, but that shows us who we really are. And if what you see makes you uncomfortable, that's okay. There's still time to turn the key, but it requires urgency, because time is a gift that keeps slipping away, and every second matters. What's most striking about Enoch's visions is that they're not trapped in the past. They shout into the present. They call us to wake up, and more than that, to make definitive decisions. You know that lifestyle where everything gets postponed: forgiveness, purpose, repentance. Enoch warns, stop that. Destiny is built today, with small actions, with internal shifts no one sees, but heaven records in full. And believe me, heaven is still writing, but the revelations didn't stop there. Because after seeing the end of time, Enoch was given a mission that would place him between two worlds, the world of men and the world of angels. He would become the mediator, the scribe, the only one trusted to document what heaven would reveal. To no one else. Few missions are as daunting as carrying words straight from heaven. Enoch was given that task. He didn't just witness divine mysteries, he was instructed to write them down. Imagine the weight of every sentence, the responsibility of recording revelations that would shape the spiritual story of humanity. This wasn't about opinions, it was about truth, straight from the mouths of angels and the presence of God. Enoch became a scribe of the invisible, a living pen of the eternal. And that's not poetic exaggeration, it's literal. He wrote it all for us. But there was more. Enoch also became the messenger between the fallen angels and the Creator. The Watchers, desperate after receiving their judgment, begged him to deliver their petitions to God. These same angels who had once defied heaven were now begging for mercy. Enoch agreed. He prayed, wrote down their words, and presented them before the Almighty, and the response, it was firm. No forgiveness would be granted. The sin was too severe. And Enoch, though compassionate, had to deliver the verdict. Can you imagine Enoch's heart in that moment? He was only a man. A righteous one, yes, but still human. And now he stood between spiritual giants, between angelic rebellion and divine justice. That teaches us something rare today: integrity. In a time when many sell out for convenience, Enoch remained faithful to his mission. He didn't water down the message. He didn't try to soften the truth. He simply delivered it. As someone who understands that their role isn't to please, it's to obey, his mission to write for future generations teaches us something profound about legacy. What are you recording with your life? Words of light or empty noise? Scripture says we are living letters. In other words, we're all writing something through our actions, choices, and reactions. Enoch left behind wisdom, not fame. He wrote so that one day someone would read and awaken, and that someone might just be you. The question is, what will you do with what you're reading? What's most powerful in all this is that Enoch didn't act out of obligation. He did it out of reverence and love. Holy reverence, not fear. Love for the Creator and even for the fallen, though they had failed. That shatters the idea that prophets are all cold and harsh. Enoch felt. Enoch wept. He interceded, even knowing it might be useless, and still he obeyed. The world needs more people like that, those who, even knowing not everyone will listen, still choose to speak the truth. The more Enoch obeyed, the more heaven revealed. It was as if every act of faithfulness unlocked a deeper level of mystery, as if God was saying, since you honor what I give, I'll show you even more. That's a spiritual key. Be faithful with little, and you'll be trusted with much. If you want deeper insight, clearer direction, greater understanding, start by honoring what you already have. Whether it's in your home, your work, or your faith, God doesn't waste mysteries on those who ignore principles. And because of this unwavering obedience, Enoch was led even further, to places where the heavens open like scrolls, where rivers of fire flow around the throne, and where the courtroom of eternity awaits. What he was about to see would take him beyond wonder and straight into the holy fear of the Lord. When Enoch was brought into the heart of heaven, he wasn't ready, and truthfully, who could be? What he saw couldn't be measured by human words. He stood before the very throne of God. Surrounding it were not whispers, but thunder, songs, from radiant beings and rivers of fire that moved as if they were alive. Time itself seemed to freeze and accelerate all at once. It wasn't just a beautiful vision, it was the breaking open of eternity. And Enoch saw it with his own eyes. But this wasn't just about awe. It was judgment. Enoch stood in the courtroom of heaven. He saw angels serving before the Almighty, each with distinct roles. He saw books being opened. Yes, books. Because everything we do is written down. Not a thought escapes. Not a motive goes unnoticed. This alone should make us rethink how we live. Because unlike human justice, divine judgment is flawless. It sees past appearances. It judges the heart. Perhaps the most unsettling part was this. The spirits of the Nephilim were still on earth. Yes, their bodies had been destroyed, but their spirits hadn't returned to heaven nor descended into hell. They lingered, and that's why Enoch calls them evil spirits, wandering entities still influencing the world with oppression, confusion, and spiritual warfare. Ever walked into a place that felt heavy? Felt thoughts in your mind that came from nowhere? Not everything is psychological. Some battles are invisible, but absolutely real. This brings a powerful sense of urgency. So many live as if only the visible exists. But Enoch shows us the opposite. The spiritual realm not only exists, it governs the physical world. So when you pray, fast, choose righteousness even when no one sees. You're moving things in dimensions beyond your sight. A believer who understands this doesn't live by impulse. He lives by purpose. He knows he's being watched by more eyes than he can count. And every decision has eternal weight. In the middle of it all, Enoch saw that God alone is sovereign. Not even the most majestic angel acted on his own. Everything originated from the throne. God was the center, the judge, the king. This dismantles every belief that heaven is some chaotic realm filled with competing powers. No, heaven is order. Enoch saw that order functioning like a cosmic clock, flawless, precise. And maybe that's the lesson. When we align with God's will, our lives begin to flow with the same precision. Another striking point is that Enoch didn't become arrogant after seeing all this. He didn't come back acting like a spiritual guru demanding followers. On the contrary, the more he saw, the more humble he became. That proves something timeless. True revelation breeds humility, not pride. A true servant of God doesn't show off, he serves. Enoch didn't return with titles, he returned with responsibility. He understood that to see heaven wasn't a privilege to parade, but a calling to carry, and just when it seemed like Enoch had seen it all, he was taken even deeper, to places where the foundations of creation revealed themselves, where fire and wind intertwined, where the spirits of the dead waited, and where torment or rest would soon unfold. What he would witness next wouldn't just touch heaven, but the very core of the earth. Imagine walking through landscapes where wind has form, water speaks, fire dances with intelligence, and the earth pulses like a living heartbeat. That's what Enoch saw. He was taken to realms where the elements of creation existed like conscious beings. Nothing was lifeless. Everything had a purpose, a voice, and divine obedience. Fire didn't burn at random. Wind didn't blow by accident. Each element responded to the will of the Most High. Enoch realized that creation isn't just scenery, it's a living character in God's story. He saw the storehouses of the winds, the secret places where snow is formed, the gates of the firmament, and the chambers that hold thunder. It might sound like poetic imagery to modern ears, but Enoch was witnessing spiritual realities that explained how the physical world operates. It was as if the universe was a grand temple, and each element served as a priest performing its sacred duty. That changes everything. It shows us that honoring creation is part of honoring the Creator. Further in, he saw the places where the souls of the dead reside. Yes, Enoch was shown the realms of the departed, both righteous and wicked. He saw those resting in peace and others groaning in anguish. Perhaps the most shocking part was realizing these places were already prepared, even before final judgment. What we do today shapes our eternity. That should cause us to rethink our priorities, refocus our purpose, and treat every decision as a seed planted in forever. In one of these places, Enoch witnessed the torments prepared for rebels. Not just human, but also spiritual. It was a realm of unbearable sorrow where there was no rest and time stood still, not out of vengeance, but out of justice. He didn't walk away from that scene unaffected. He came back with tears in his eyes, because understanding hell isn't just about fearing punishment. It's about valuing grace. It reminds us that we were spared from something we could never endure on our own. But on the other side, Enoch saw the portals of blessing. He saw pathways of light where the souls of the righteous were led into eternal pastures. Environments filled with gentle breeze, celestial songs, and a peace beyond description. These weren't just rewards like medals. They were the natural result of a life aligned with God. Justice was perfect. There was no favoritism, only alignment. And this divine justice never fails, never delays, never errs. His observation of the elements also carried a practical message. Everything God created has a cycle, a limit, and a purpose. And if creation itself lives within boundaries, why do humans insist on crossing them? Maybe the secret to a full life is understanding our place in God's design, not as the center, but as a part, a piece in something much greater. Living like that doesn't mean being passive. It means being wise. It means walking in reverence. But Enoch wasn't finished. The visions were deepening, and he was about to enter a new dimension, the parables about the end of days. A throne was about to appear, and one would rise from it, the Son of Man, who would judge all of creation. When Enoch began receiving visions about the end of days, he was no longer just a witness. He had become part of the narrative. The parables revealed to him didn't come as vague riddles, but as spiritual keys. He saw a glorious throne, and seated upon it the Son of Man. This wasn't just any figure. His presence radiated judgment, justice, and compassion all at once. Enoch didn't just see him, he recognized him. And even centuries before Jesus was born, there he was, resplendent, eternal, the judge of all creation. That revelation was a lightning bolt in the dark history of mankind. It showed that the plan of redemption wasn't some last-minute idea. The Messiah was never a reaction. He was always the foundation. When the Son of Man rose to judge, every being bowed. There were no arguments, no excuses. The righteous were welcomed. The wicked were confronted. This crushes the illusion that God will simply overlook everything. No, there will be judgment. But there will also be perfect justice. Unlike anything this world can offer, Enoch saw books being opened once again, books full of memory, full of record. Our choices don't vanish. They build our eternal outcome. And the names written in the book of life would be called out by the Son of Man himself. That moment, so full of authority, was also full of hope, because it meant that the pain of the faithful, the sacrifices made in silence, the unnoticed acts of love, they were not forgotten. God remembers those who remain faithful, even when the world pays no attention. One of the most powerful moments was when Enoch saw the kingdoms of the earth being weighed, nations, leaders, empires, all brought before the throne, and they weren't judged by their power, but by what they did with it. That strikes deeply. It means that small acts of justice matter. A business owner who treats his workers with dignity, a mother who raises her children in the faith, a young man who resists the system. All of it will be considered, all of it echoes in heaven's court. The parables also showed a time when the wicked would try to hide, but there would be no cave deep enough, no darkness thick enough to conceal their guilt. Truth would be exposed, not with hatred, but with clarity. The Son of Man would separate light from darkness, truth from lies, eternity from illusion. What was once confusion would become revelation. And though it may seem terrifying, it would also mark the beginning of a restored world. Surprisingly, Enoch didn't only see judgment, he saw renewal. The earth would be cleansed. The righteous would inherit a new world, governed by peace. The faithful angels would sing songs of victory. That reframes how we view the end times. It's not just about destruction, it's about new beginnings. God isn't simply closing a chapter, he's preparing a new heaven and a new earth. Enoch saw it, he felt it. And even without understanding everything, he trusted that the plan was good. But before the book could close, Enoch still had one final experience. His story wouldn't end with visions, but with something even more mysterious. Enoch would be taken, caught up, lifted from the earth in a way that no one had ever seen. A man who walked with God and suddenly was no more. What really happened to him? The next revelation was beyond earth. Enoch did not die, and that sentence alone carries a weight that breaks human logic. While all the great men of the Bible met natural ends, Enoch simply was taken, caught up, removed from the world without passing through death. The Bible says Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. But the book of Enoch goes further. It describes this elevation as the culmination of a life fully aligned with heaven. And the most incredible part? It all began with a simple decision to walk with God. This rapture wasn't just a personal reward, it was a message to all generations. A divine sign that secret pathways still exist between heaven and earth, that we are not bound by limited realities. And yes, it's possible to live in such a way that God desires your presence so deeply that he brings you close before your time. That stirs the soul. It forces us to ask, are we living in a way that's worthy of the calling we've received? Are we ready to be taken if heaven were to call today? Enoch's legacy remained. His writings were preserved, his words crossed millennia. Even though the Book of Enoch wasn't included in the traditional biblical canon, his prophecies echoed in the New Testament. Jude quoted him. Peter echoed his warnings. And that tells us something crucial. When something truly comes from God, time doesn't erase it, it proves it. What is true remains, even if it's silenced, omitted, or forgotten. So never underestimate what God can do through your obedience. Your name may not be trending, but it may be written in the books of heaven. Enoch also represents a future, hope. Many scholars see him as a symbol of the rapture promised to the church, a sign that there will indeed come a time when the faithful are caught up before final judgment. That's a comforting thought, but also a sobering one, because it makes us ask, are we living with that expectation? Or are we so consumed by the now that we've forgotten the eternal could interrupt us at any moment? What's most inspiring about Enoch's journey is that he didn't chase the extraordinary. He simply remained consistent in the ordinary. He prayed, he meditated, he walked with God, and to heaven that was more powerful than any miracle. That's a key for anyone who feels insignificant. Maybe you're not seeing results yet, but if you're being faithful, heaven is taking notes. The secret isn't being celebrated by the world, it's being approved by the Creator. That's what took Enoch to heaven, not spectacle but faithfulness. So his legacy isn't a biography of earthly glory, but a heavenly roadmap for those who come after. And you're reading this right now not by accident, but because that calling is still echoing. Enoch may no longer be on earth, but his voice still speaks. It tells us it's possible to rise above mediocrity, that it's possible to walk with God in chaotic times, and that anyone who surrenders fully, even without all the answers, becomes part of something far greater than they could ever imagine. But before we close this story, we need to return to where it all began. Because if Enoch was taken, then somewhere between heaven and earth, he may have left something behind, a mystery, a message, a code, something that could only be fully understood in our generation. And perhaps now, in 2025, it's finally being revealed. So tell me honestly, what will you do with everything you've just heard? Will you just close this video and move on? Or let this truth stir you to the core? The Book of Enoch wasn't revealed just to be understood. It was written to wake you up. Are you ready to live with purpose, reverence, and a life aligned with heaven? Or will you keep ignoring the invisible while the spiritual shapes every part of your reality? Remember, the watchers fell because of pride. Enoch rose because of obedience. Which of those stories do you want your life to reflect? If this message spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to wake up, someone you know who's still spiritually asleep. And before you go, subscribe to this channel and turn on the bell icon so you never miss a new revelation. Because what's coming goes far beyond an ancient book, and you cannot afford to be left behind.